In this lesson, we're going to be modeling the first floor slab from plan. Now, to get started, let's turn on the correct layer for the upper level, which is going to be called first plan. And we can also turn on the layer called first grid. This is the one that will have our height information so that we know at which height all of the finished floors are at. You can also turn off the layer called ground plan, since you, for now, are not going to need that. And just before you start modeling a brand new, fresh slab outline, ask yourself whether you can't use the one from your ground floor. In our case, our levels are quite similar, especially around the entrance and this bedroom block. So let's go ahead and select this slab, and let's type in Ctrl V on our keyboards and just make sure that copy is selected here. And then manually move it upwards, and we're going to tweak those exact heights very shortly. I'm going to select all these objects, isolate them, right click, there we go. And I'm now going to start working on this upper level slab. I can delete the edit poly modifier since I'm not going to be using it. All of these stairs and everything are no longer applicable. And I'm now going to choose the spline, and I'm just going to manually move it up to the right height. So I'm going to type in 6.25 for this one. And this one is going to be 6.2. And those heights are mentioned for you over there and there. What you can do now is you can take this slab and you can now isolate it further just to remove the grids layer, and you can start looking over it in detail and seeing where you can start tweaking it, modifying it, and working with that spline. Now, there are areas here on the upper floor where we have balconies, but those are going to be about 5 centimeters lower than this floor slab. So that can be done with a separate spline. So let's go and first of all make sure that we're on our slabs layer. So that's activated, good. And we can now start drawing simple rectangles if we can for those balcony objects. And we can also do something quite similar here. Now again, it does help for you to go back to perhaps the CAD plans and just look at a printout of this upper level. So right now, looking at it in 3ds Max, because everything is the same color, this might start looking a little bit confusing to you. So if you are confused as to what the plans are telling you, in other words, reading them is confusing, go back to the printout of the CAD plans, look at the reference folder. You're going to have the photoshopped plan of this upper level, and that'll help you with seeing what exactly is inside, what's outside. This garage is downstairs, for example. You're looking at the roof of it here, and this is the upper level bedroom. So once that is all clear to you, then you can come back and start modeling. So the plans in 3D Max will never really tell you the full story. They'll just give you that reference position that you can then lock onto. So anyhow, I'm going to continue just by selecting a few of these vertices, and I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard. I'm going to select these as well and delete them, and I'm just going to continue moving them around until I basically get everything in the right place. So here I'm going to leave this overlap over that edge, so that is fine for me. I'm also going to, I can leave this as it is since there's going to be a wall in that place, so no problem there. Over here I don't need this cutout, so I'm going to delete that. And I can actually go ahead and delete quite a lot of this information, and I may go and rebuild this part since there is quite a lot of change to this area. Do however note that if you start selecting vertices, you may also go and select parts from this lower level. So let's just go and shift that off to the side, and we can work on that later. And then just to keep things a little bit cleaner, I'm now going to delete most of these vertices here, just keeping a few of them that I can then tweak very shortly. So I'm going to delete that whole bunch. I'm going to delete these two as well. So I'm just selecting the vertex and hitting delete on my keyboard, and I'm going to shift these upwards. And again, you can either do this precisely by snapping, or you can just start by doing it by eye, which I'm quite a fan of. And here I'm going to look at that X position, which I'm going to read here. I'm going to just press Control C there, Control V there, and basically that will paste my X coordinate. And here I want to take that Y coordinate, copy it and paste it into here. Then I'm going to delete this vertex, and that's basically just going to very nicely, simply square all of that off. So I think that that's pretty much fine for the inner slab. What you can also now start doing is we now need to pull back this level. So this is basically a void that looks down from the upper level into the entrance. So I don't need any of these vertices. I'm going to delete all of those. So basically the slab is just going to make a straight line here. You may, however, want to keep this little notch in place. I can see that there is this slight notch ever so small just in that area. So keep that little step there. And then the same thing here, we basically have that notch that is repeated from the ground floor. And here, pretty much everything can be kept as it is. So I'm going to do this refinement to this slab as well. I'm going to do that off camera right now. So I'm going to press pause, and then once this level has been tweaked, just the way that I've been tweaking this, I'm going to then continue recording and then just show you the rest of the process. So now that entire spline outline has been drawn, and if we have a look at it from 3D without this plan, we just Control-I that selection, you can isolate it, and then this is basically what we've drawn so far. So the level that we have down here, we can even detach that if we want to. It may simplify things with our materials later, since you don't necessarily want to have the same material outside on the terrace as you do inside the building, especially in the bedrooms. So that material here can be different, so we can have a separate spline. Then the material over here too, let's just zero out that. You can see that this object is at 6.2 and the floor here is at 6.45. That should be the height that it's at. So if you select that spline, you see that's at 6.25. So basically all of these splines are now at the right height. And just to make things simpler as well, let's go and right click, attach these objects. So basically we have a simpler set of objects. Here we have ordinary balconies. Here we have that large terrace, which may be a different texture. I'm not really sure at the moment yet. And here we have the object for the main floor. So these are the outlines, and getting this right is really the most crucial part. Afterwards, everything else is just going to be done on an editable poly layer. So speaking of that editable poly, what you want to do, if I just unisolate all of that, is you want to go and have a look at your elevation. You could also have a look at the section that you have in place here, and you could basically start to see what those thicknesses should be. So let's just isolate that. And you could either at this point add an editable poly and then just start dragging down. It may be easier though to either shell it or extrude it. So both of those modifiers will work just fine. Let's go and add an extrude modifier for a change. So instead of 3.5, let's do it minus 0.2. I'm not exactly sure of the thickness, so you'd have to have a look here. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to look at the front view now, and you can then increase this figure. You can basically play with that parameter, and you could read off that correct thickness. So that's 0.3, including the actual floor surface itself, and that would basically run throughout the entire building. So exactly the same thing that we've done to this slab, we can now do to the other splines as well. So let's just quickly go and select these slabs and select those layers in our scene. Right click, isolate, and let's just choose these upper ones and re-isolate again so that we have a clearer picture of what we're doing. And let's start off by just taking this extrude, dragging it onto these other objects. But instead of minus 0.3, it's going to be 0.25 so that the bottom basically lines up flush. If you have it 0.3, you're going to see a step here, which does sometimes happen if there is a floating ceiling below your slabs. So here you can now have that 0.25. We can now copy this and we can paste this as an instance, which means that if we had to change anything here, we basically are changing all of that all together. Let's select all these objects, and just for neatness sake, let's make sure that all of these colors are by layer so that we have a single color unifying all of these slabs. So that is pretty much it for this lesson. We've gone and copied the floor slab from the lower level, we've copied it upwards and then we've tweaked it where we needed to, and then we've just added extrude modifiers according to our sections and elevations so that we can gauge that right thickness. And basically now you're ready to continue the same process that you did downstairs by continuing with the walls and then the window frames and so forth. And I'm going to jump to that in the next lesson, but just before we go and do the walls and everything, we're going to look at how we start modeling up this set of stairs. It's quite a complex stair. It's not just something you can pull out of a reference file somewhere. So we're going to go and model this custom stair now, and that will be done in the next lesson. So hang around for that. It's going to be quite interesting.